081 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Hail September, which used to be, as the name implies, the 7th month of the year until Julius Caesar invented the Julian calendar of 12 months. You might think that calling the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th month the 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th calls out for reform. We have resisted change for more than 2,000 years. The Prime Minister was pretty gloomy last week, telling us that things in Britain will get worse. Could it be that he knows that everything in the British public sector cries out for reform, but he has no plan and no ambition to make changes? I'll discuss that with my political panel. Founded in 2022, Brunswick Vocal Arts is dedicated to nurturing exceptionally talented classical singers as they transition from their studies to their professional careers. The charity offers them the important opportunity to perform operatic roles for the first time with professional orchestral musicians. Gary Matthewen, the esteemed conductor, and the charity's artistic director will join me. President Volodymyr Zelensky has come under a barrage of criticism from soldiers, lawmakers and military analysts over the rapid advances made by the Russian army in eastern Ukraine since Kiev launched its bold incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Defence analyst Peter Caddick-Adams will be here to assess whether Ukraine has made the right move. And Stefan Kyriasis, the hallowed arts editor of the Daily Express, has, as one might expect, immersed himself in the vibrant world of theatre once more, and this week he will share his review of the electrifying production of A Night with Janis Joplin. Before all of that, your headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you very much and good morning to you. Just coming up to 2 minutes past 11. The top story this morning, Israel says it has recovered the bodies of 6 hostages from a tunnel in Gaza, where that group were killed just before troops arrived, according to the IDF. The victims include Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg-Polin, who was captured at a music festival on October the 7th. US President Joe Biden says he is devastated and outraged by the news and has vowed to work around the clock on a deal to secure the release of all the remaining hostages in Gaza. Hamas, though, have blamed the deaths on Israel's refusal to sign a ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, a pause in fighting has begun today in Gaza, allowing international aid agencies to launch a mass polio vaccination campaign. Around 640,000 children under 10 will be treated during breaks in the conflict over the next 3 days. It follows the first confirmed case of polio in the territory in 25 years, with a 10-month-old baby now paralysed because of the virus. The ceasefire, though, will only last during daylight hours. Here, the head of the police watchdog in England and Wales has claimed the criminal justice system is, he says, dysfunctional. Andy Cook told the Sunday Telegraph that too often officers are getting the basics wrong. He's also described the lack of prison places a nightmare. Well, speaking on the Camilla Tominey show just a few moments ago, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly said, "We need to get back to the cornerstone of British policing."
They need to focus on the crimes that affect people's everyday lives. When I was Home Secretary, I made it absolutely clear they were to pursue all reasonable lines of inquiry. They were to crack down on shoplifting. This idea there was a £200 limit, get rid of that, because if you don't crack down on the small crimes, those criminals get more and more severe, and then you have a real problem.
James Cleverly there, the Shadow Home Secretary. Well, police are pushing for upgraded charges after 2 victims attacked in separate incidents at the Notting Hill Carnival have sadly died. One was a mother stabbed in front of her young child, the other a chef who worked with Gordon Ramsay. The Home Secretary's called the news deeply distressing and shocking. Yvette Cooper has condemned the terrible and appalling violence, stating it has no place on our streets. Meanwhile, in Surrey, police there have confirmed they're not seeking anyone else in connection with the deaths of 3 children and a man found in a Staines home yesterday. That incident, described as isolated, took place around lunchtime and is now under investigation. The force has referred itself to the police watchdog because of having prior contact with those involved. Parents are being accused of wrecking their children's education by letting them stay off school too often. That's according to the Education Secretary. She's told the Sunday Times there's an epidemic of absence in schools. Bridget Phillipson says she won't apologise, though, for fining parents for letting their children skip school for holidays, birthdays, or, she says, even a runny nose. The government's crackdown aims to tackle the growing issue as the new school year begins. Oasis are urging fans to be wary of counterfeit or void tickets on the secondary market. Their reunion tour next year has now sold out, with the process of buying tickets lasting over 10 hours yesterday, as people eager to see the Gallagher brothers complained about error messages, being kicked out of queues, or even being mistaken for bots on some sites. And finally, some weather for you. The Met Office has extended thunderstorm warnings across a large part of the UK now. Much of England and Wales and Scotland are now covered by that alert. That's for tomorrow and for today too. Forecasters say there's a risk of flooding because of heavy showers and hail. Wonderful news. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'll be back with you in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam Francis. It's common ground that public services are in a parlous state in Britain. A newly elected government with a huge majority might have the authority and the political space to make bold reforms, but so far it's unclear what Labour will change beyond freeing prisoners to create spaces in jails, processing asylum claims faster so that illegal immigrants disappear from sight and from the headlines, and meeting union demands for higher pay with no requirement to change working practices in, for example, the National Health Service or on the railways. Is it his own lack of imagination that makes Sir Keir Starmer gloomy about Britain's future? I'm joined by Aubrey Allegretti, Chief Political Correspondent for The Times, Baroness Claire Fox, founder of the Academy of Ideas, and political commentator Alice Grant. Welcome to you all. Alice, have I missed something? Is there a great plan for the reform of the public services that I am in ignorance of?
I think what you said was so true. But it's not only just a lack of imagination coming from Keir Starmer, but I also think the solutions that he's proposing are just fundamentally so flawed. I mean, the release scheme, the early release scheme, is such an unbelievable scheme when you think about we need to build more prisons, not release criminals into society. And as you said, mentioned as well, the asylum issue. This is an extremely important issue for the electorate. And under the guise of trying to tackle the root of the problem and get to the gangs, what he's doing is effectively allowing asylum seekers to come here for free, and taxpayers' money is now being funded, is being used to fund hotels for asylum seekers. It's so deeply unjust.
In fairness to Sir Keir Starmer and Labour, does anybody have any ideas, Alice, for the reform of the public services?
Well, I think we're definitely seeing the rise of political parties who are trying to offer alternative solutions, but it's clear this has gone on for far too long. And the Conservative Party, which we saw as the vehicle to try to push policies which would actually sort out these issues which voters so deeply care about, I mean, nothing's been done for 14 years. So we're going to have to grin and bear a Labour government which simply doesn't have the spine to actually tackle these issues, and who are very soft on and very liberal on policies which you know are extremely important and which we can't afford to simply be relaxed about. I mean, we're talking about illegal activity here in so many ways. We're talking about illegal migration. We're talking about criminals who were sent to jail for a reason. And I think what's most worrying is that he's doing this for a political purpose. This is so that he can put into jail people who've been protesting, and many of them all for writing tweets. This is to make space for people who are essentially being sentenced with already in mind being sent to jail.
Claire, you founded the Institute of Ideas. Are ideas what are lacking today?
Yeah, ideas and courage. I would like to point out that it's not that I've got those ideas to solve the public services crisis, but I just to sort of broaden it out a little bit from the examples you used, I was actually very optimistic. Well, and I want to still be, that Wes Streeting, the health secretary, would take on the health service, and he made it very clear it shouldn't be ring-fenced away from reform. I thought, oh, maybe there's going to be a big shake-up. But the big announcement this week on the NHS and what's causing the problems of the NHS and what will solve it, we discover, are people who smoke outdoors. I mean, Keir Starmer actually said the way that we will solve the problem of the NHS is to tackle preventable illness like smoking, therefore we're going to ban people smoking outside pubs. And I thought, where's Streeting when you need him? I mean, if that's it. And then, you know, one of the issues that I'm passionately interested in is to sort out schooling, to sort out universities, because I think there is a real problem with an endless amount of not an endless, but a lot of money going into schooling and universities that then is not producing brilliant education, not serving both either pupils or students well. And what are the two things? Bridget Phillipson today has announced that the big problem with schooling is parents who won't get their kids to go to school. She's targeting ordinary people, not anything else. And when she talked about the curriculum, it was straight after the riots where she said, I'm going to get teachers to now both tackle disinformation. Anyway, she's basically messing around with the curriculum rather than reforming the system. And then the final thing was just on universities. There was an attempt at doing some reform on universities in terms of academic freedom, sorting out something that's been eating away at the heart of universities, and Bridget Phillipson has cancelled it. Now, they inherited...
What I wanted to say was...
Oh, yeah, go on.
Well, at the beginning of your answer, you said in passing that you didn't have the ideas at the moment. Did you actually mean that?
Yeah,
Do you think the public services in Britain are simply unreformable? It's not just that Starmer has no imagination.
No, I don't think they are, but I do think it would be a massive task, and I just don't want to be glib. You know, I kind of pine on here about what I think about social care, what I think about the health service. I've got opinions, but I do actually think this is a serious matter. I mean, if you're going to completely shake up criminal justice, it can't be on the back of an envelope. And whilst I like to think that I've got lots of things that I can contribute to the discussion, I do think that it's a serious matter. It's the very heart of what's going on. And what most people's experience of the state is their relationship with public services. But, you know, I don't want to just say money's wasted, but we could see there's something going wrong. So I would like to get those people who might know something about education to sort it out, but that needs leadership. That's why I started off with the Wes Streeting point, because I do think that they can see that there are massive things that would need to change. And that's where the courage comes in, because that's going to be very unpopular. It's going to mean having a conflict, often with staff, with trade unions, with a kind of group of, as they call it, stakeholders who will object to things changing because they're actually not unhappy with the system as it is.
Aubrey Allegretti, you're very well informed about the Labour Party. You're very informed about all parties. What do you hear from within the Labour Party? Tell us about these two things, ideas and courage. Where do you think we stand on ideas and courage in the Labour Party?
So I think there are three things to unpick. First of all, when it comes to the pay deals that were announced in a sort of flurry after Labour took office, I think the strategic thinking behind it was to, if you like, bank the credit of giving these significant pay deals to public sector workers, which unions had argued would bring their wages back in line with real terms growth experience since 2010 or the financial crisis in 2008. So Labour is attempting, if you like, to sort of hand over the money, hoping that in following years they will be able to say to the unions, look, we gave you a good deal in year one, so now we need help from you to sort of bring you with us and the public behind these support. The second point is around waste, which Claire touched on. And I think the reason that Labour is in a good position here is that the Conservatives, towards the end of office certainly, seemed so frivolous with public money. I mean, the example given most recently was Labour deciding to scrap the helicopter contract that Rishi Sunak had taken out. Now, Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, argues that he cancelled it anyway, but then apparently that was overridden. So I think Labour is able to say, with some legitimacy, that they are bearing down on waste as a whole. It's a question of whether or not that is slightly more piecemeal than the more wholesale reform that is actually needed. And I think the third point to make is that Rachel Reeves sees the whole way to sort of galvanise growth and generate money to fund public services as being through businesses investing in the UK. And we have the Global Investment Summit that's taking place in about a month's time. That is probably going to be her moment where she says to business, please come here, invest. We're a safe country to do business with. We're not going to change chancellors every 49 days.
But Aubrey, even if we were a bit richer, and there are many questions to be asked about the methodology there, but even if we were a bit richer, that wouldn't make our health service of world quality. That wouldn't make our trains run better. That wouldn't sort out our prisons. That wouldn't give us a police service that was operating properly. I mean, the sums here are not marginal, and I suspect it's not to do with money at all. I think I suspect it's to do with authority and leadership within those services. So is there no hope that Labour is going to make changes?
There is a sort of question of putting the cart before the horse about whether or not Labour is prepared to hand over the money and, you know, try to start the very immediate injections of cash into public services so that people start to feel the effects of more funding for police to make streets safer and to bear down on waiting lists before they can necessarily kind of generate the revenues through increased taxation brought in by more business investment. Whether or not it's a strategy that's going to work, we'll probably have to wait some 12 to 24 months to see.
Alice, in your first answer, you mentioned migration, and it seems to me, you know, that Labour doesn't have any policy on migration, except the one I mentioned, which is kind of to make the unlawful migrants disappear into the system so that we can no longer count them. Do you think Labour underestimates how damaging the migration issue can be to a party in office?
Yes, absolutely. And it is a very dangerous policy they're pursuing here, because it's one that the British people have showed time and time again they very deeply care about. And we've already seen the effect of how divisive it is in our society. And trying to just make the problem go away isn't actually going to solve anything. I think what you said earlier as well was extremely apt, that, you know, we've had money thrown at our public services time and time again. The NHS has enough money. It's about management when it comes to these services and how badly they're being managed and how badly the funds are being managed. So in truth, it is about authority and it is about leadership, and certainly in terms of wider policy areas like migration or like criminal justice, you know, to tell us, to stand on that podium and tell us that things will have to be painful for us, you know, because of the October budget. It's unbelievable. We elected this, you know, we elected Keir Starmer so that he could fix and do a proper job, not blame us and use emotionally manipulative language to try to make us feel bad for, you know, what's going to happen and how taxes are going to increase. It's not an appropriate way to govern a country, I think. It's, you know, we want solutions, we want leadership, we want courage.
Claire, you were going to come in a moment ago. But I would say, by the way, in addition to those things, we want optimism.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Well, that's the difficulty. I mean, partly what Keir Starmer was saying in the Rose Garden was times are going to be tough because they spent all the money. And the implication then is that public services will suffer because of a financial question. Now, it is the case that in an immediate sense, you know, if everything's falling apart, the library's closing because there's not enough money, or you can't get your parents in a care home or anything, that feels like it's a financial question. But actually, it's an invasion of what was really promised, which was a shake-up of public services, which is not a financial question. And it's also the case that we have seen when Keir Starmer wants to be authoritative and decisive, that he can be. I'm not necessarily agreeing with the way he did it, but after the riots, he stood in front of everybody and said, right, you know, we've got this crisis of policing and crisis of courts and crisis of prisons. Don't worry, we're ignoring that. We're going to act decisively. Now, I think it's rather authoritarian, some of the things he did, but nonetheless, he did do it. He took a decision that things were so important that he was going to act as a prosecutor in that particular tone. And, you know, that felt like a big moment. I think it's quite a censorious and scary moment, but nonetheless, it was a decisive action. We haven't, as I've indicated, seen that with the other public services. And I think that if you've... I'm not... I mean, I was so critical of what the Conservatives did. I don't want it to sound as though this is just that. I'm delighted that they say they're going to build... have the courage to say they'll build on the Greenbelt. I think we need more housing. But if you're not tackling migration, if you're ignoring the regulatory morass that is associated with environmentalism that stops houses being built, then you can say it, but it won't happen.
Aubrey, may I ask you to tell me rather briefly, following your first answer, which sounded to me as though they were kicking the can down the road, do you think there's any serious chance of serious reform of a public service? Let's take health as an example.
I mean, I certainly hope so. I mean, we all probably hope so. And as Claire said, I mean, Wes Streeting was probably the best example of an incoming Secretary of State who really seemed to grasp the extent of the problem. I mean, the day he marched into the Department of Health and said the NHS is broken, that is the policy of this government. Now comes the hard work. And, you know, all of the Secretaries of State are going to be making asks of the Treasury to be able to fund things that they say will be reforms and take money in the short term in order to get productivity gains in the medium to long term. Whether or not Rachel Reeves is quite round to that idea yet, we'll have to see.
Thank you very much. The panel is unanimous in being anxious and fretful about reforming the public services. Many thanks to Aubrey, Claire and Alice, who will rejoin me in the next hour. To sing well is just one requisite for an aspiring opera singer. After the break, I'll be joined by Gary Matterman, whose charity, Brunswick Vocal Arts, gives the opportunity to young singers to perform an operatic role with an orchestra for the first time.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
EasyJet is launching a new recruitment drive focused on attracting cabin crew members over 50 and those even considering retirement.
Well, the initiative is called Returnships and is inspired by research that suggests that 75% of people over 50 years old believe that now is the ideal time to embark on a new career.
Joining us now to discuss what it takes to embark on a second career as cabin crew is Helen Williams. Good morning, Helen.
Hi, good morning, Helen.
Welcome. Just touching down in our studio.
It is. I've had a few days off and now I'm here.
So you are now cabin crew.
I am.
What inspired you to get into it? What did you do before? How did it all come around?
Oh, so when I graduated, I took an office job with my grad scheme, and that job lasted 6 months, and I started working for a European carrier. I did just over 5 years at that European carrier and had an absolutely fabulous time. I then went on to a wet lease operation with an Irish carrier and another mainline UK carrier. I then decided to have time out. I had a business, I had a family, I had children, and last autumn I decided, why not? Let's go back and do it all again. So returning to that European carrier that I'd worked at when I was in my early 20s.
And what is that like for you now, returning that bit older, having that life experience, having your children? Do you think that's been a benefit to you?
It's absolutely been a benefit. I mean, the amount of parents that thank me for helping me with their small children when they're crying on a flight. I am that person now.
When you went back for a second time, did you notice more sort of older people amongst your sort of colleagues?
I did. So when I returned onto my initial course in March of this year, just over half the course were over the age of 30.
Wow.
Which was absolutely phenomenal. And I was expecting to return and be with a lot of younger, 18, 19, 24. I was expecting to be that dinosaur. And that first day of training, to find out that I wasn't the dinosaur, you have no idea how exciting that was. And they've gone on, that particular group, to be phenomenal crew members.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The Brunswick Vocal Arts Charity, which I support, is dedicated to providing young singers with the opportunity to perform an operatic role with an orchestra for the first time. And on Tuesday, the 3rd of September, at St Paul's Church in Wilton Place in London, a lucky few will sing highlights from Mozart's Don Giovanni in front of a paying audience with an orchestra and under the baton of Gary Matthewman, the conductor and artistic director of Brunswick Vocal Arts, who joins me now. Welcome to GB News. What is the gap? Why is it important that young singers have this opportunity with an orchestra?
There's a gauntlet, if you like, that I think lots of young singers have to run between finishing the relative comfort of their conservatoire education and becoming firmly established as professional singers. And lots of the ones who show real verve and real promise and work really hard end up for a little bit too long being trapped in a kind of cycle of being the understudy or doing lots of chorus work. Not that there's anything wrong at all with doing chorus work in an opera house. It's a fantastic experience. But some of them are ready to kind of go that extra mile and reach that next milestone. And we as a charity thought, well, what a lovely thing it would be to handpick some of these best young singers, give them intensive coaching on the role that they're going to perform, give them the chance to work with professional players for the first time, so I don't have to kind of spend lots of time teaching the orchestra, if you like, how the thing goes. These are people who have played at Glyndebourne, they've played at Garsington, they're experienced professionals. Invite industry movers and shakers along, give these young singers a chance, and crucially, have the thing professionally filmed and recorded. Because the first question all young singers are asked when they meet somebody influential now is, well, what's your website? Or these people will just go and Google these names. And if there isn't high-quality, slick footage out there, it's just some shaky mobile phone footage from a concert they did or something, that's the impression that's out there in the kind of online of these singers. So giving them footage of their concerts that we've prepared them very well for, it's with professional players, it's a supportive audience, it's got influential people in it, is hopefully a very, very useful thing for these people at that crucial juncture, if you like that.
Much of your career has been about accompanying singers. So you've been playing the piano and the singer has been singing. And as part of that also, you have coached the singer, coaching the singer either towards a recital or towards their performance, their part in an opera. Tell me a little bit about that process. What is it that you bring to the singer?
That requires a kind of chameleon-like approach on my part, in that some singers are very certain of what they want to do, and they'll come to the rehearsal and effectively say, this is how I do it, this is what I want to do, play it like this. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there are people who are either less experienced or maybe less sure of themselves, and they want a lot of input from me. And then there's, of course, the sliding scale with everything in between. But what I find really, really fascinating is that often singers are so focused on, of course, producing high-quality sound. It's easy and understandable that sometimes other aspects of what they do are not sidelined, but kind of sometimes aren't given the kind of focus that might actually help them to sing even better.
For example, you make them think about the meaning of what they're singing.
Yeah, it's a case of asking them questions which make them bring a character to life in a more animalistic human way, so that when an audience member witnesses this person singing, they don't just think, oh, that's a pretty noise. They think, oh, there's something going on here that I recognise from my own human experience, which is what art is, I guess, crudely speaking. So asking them questions about who this character is, what's their status, what's their age, even seemingly silly questions like what's the temperature of their air they're breathing here, or whatever it is, making them kind of come to a more specific conclusion about who that character is going to be when they sing it this time round is a good thing.
And the singers who will be singing on Tuesday evening at St Paul's Church in Wilton Crescent.
Wilton Place in Knightsbridge.
Wilton Place in Knightsbridge. Have they been through that process with you? Have you made them think about their roles in that way?
We've been working for the last few weeks, yeah.
Yeah. And some of this does require a lot of imagination. I mean, for a young singer to imagine himself in the role of the old roue, Don Giovanni, it takes quite an imaginative leap.
Yeah. So that's another important thing. It's a kind of singing well in this context is not just about singing. It's about what you can bring to the stage as I say, as a human animal, and especially in a context like this, which is related, I think, to when people sing recitals. They're just standing there in front of a piano, and say they sing 20 songs in that one evening. They've got to present 20 roles, 20 mini operatic roles, if you like, and we need to see the change in their bearing. We need to see the change in their approach to the text, as well as to the kind of the technical focus of their singing and how they produce sound. So it's an endlessly fascinating thing to work on them with.
You've been doing this for a little while now, a couple of years. What's the feedback so far? How are you judging your results?
People seem very happy that we're doing it. We're gradually getting more interest from, as I said, movers and shakers within the opera industry and the music industry, which is a good thing. And crucially, we're getting more and more interest from singers who are of this age, of this stage in their career. People are gradually, my hope is that people are gradually noticing that we're doing quality work, and it's something that they might want to be involved in the future. And
have singers themselves come back to you and said, yes, this made a difference to me?
Absolutely.
What sort of difference did it make?
That they loved the fact that we went into such detail in the coachings, that they loved the fact that they got to sing this role for the first time, not without being disrespectful to smaller communities, but in some kind of remote village, but in central London with professional players, with influential people there listening and having it professionally recorded as well. These are very useful things for a young singer, as I said.
And I don't know how you managed to join me this morning, because you must be busy rehearsing.
We start at 3 o'clock this afternoon, next rehearsal, yeah.
Very good. And the performance is, let's say it one more time, when is it?
It's on Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. at St Paul's, Knightsbridge.
Very good. Thank you very much to Gary Matthewman. After the break, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the ongoing Kursk offensive is a necessary collateral step in Ukraine's broader strategy for victory against Russian aggression. Has he got the tactics right? I'll be joined by defence analyst Peter Caddy-Adam.
Hello, good morning. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Through the day today, we'll see a mixture of fairly warm sunshine, particularly towards the south-east of the UK, some thunderstorms also developing, and quite a humid feel to the weather, again, particularly towards the south and south-east. So looking at detail for today then, confirmation of some showers already breaking out this morning across some central and southern parts of England. As we go through the day, they'll become more extensive across parts of the Midlands, eventually building across parts of northern England too into the afternoon. So it's the north and northwest of the UK and across some western spots seeing the best of the lingering brightness into the afternoon. A few lighter showers here, but with those thundery downpours we could see some flooding issues, as I say, particularly across the central spine of the UK. Temperatures peaking in the southeast at 27 Celsius and a very humid feel to the day here. So to end the day, across the north and northwest of the UK, we'll hold on to some sunshine towards the northwest of Scotland. A few showers starting to push up from the south into central, southern and eastern parts of Scotland there. 1 or 2 showers also across Northern Ireland, although the bulk of the end of the afternoon here set fair. Heading further south, more in the way of cloud generally across England and Wales. Again, there'll still be some heavy, even thundery showers in places, particularly across the Midlands up into northern parts of England, with perhaps the far south and southeast starting to see those showers easing. Heading through the evening then into the overnight period, those showers continue their journey northwards into parts of eastern Scotland into the early hours of Monday. Meanwhile, a band of more general rain working in across some western and southwestern parts, with the clearest skies there in the central spine of the UK. A very muggy night to come across the UK on Sunday night, temperatures no lower than the low to mid-teens, even upper teens across the south and southeast of the UK. Monday looks a very unsettled day, unfortunately, across the whole of the UK. Low pressure in charge, giving showers or longer spells of rain. Still some thunderstorms in places towards the far northeast for a time, and fresher air moving in across Northern Ireland later. Temperatures here up to 18 Celsius, nearer 22 or 23 Celsius down towards the southeast in the afternoon. 23 there in London is 73 in Fahrenheit, and I say close to the seasonal average. That's pretty much it for me. See you soon.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the programme. More than 3 weeks have passed since Ukraine broke through Putin's defences and seized about 450 square miles of Russian territory. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg told the German newspaper Die Welt that Ukraine was fully within its rights to launch a surprise offensive into Russia's Kursk border region as an act of self-defence. But Ukraine is now in danger of losing the town of Pokrovsk, and Zelensky admits that the situation is very difficult. Defence analyst Peter Caddick-Adams joins me now to discuss whether Ukraine has blundered. Peter, what do you think?
I'm not sure they have. I mean, the original idea was to strike where the Russians least expected it, which was actually invading Russia proper, which is what Russia didn't expect. The West didn't expect. I mean, Ukraine kept this secret to itself. They didn't tell the West or NATO that they were going to do this. And that gave them the element of operational surprise, which is very, very difficult to acquire in modern warfare. And the idea was obviously to take the pressure off the battles in and around Pokrovsk and the Eastern Front and get the Russians to pull their more better seasoned elite troops to defend Mother Russia. And that hasn't quite worked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, as I say, Pokrovsk, which is on the Eastern Front, appears to be in danger. One commentator has said if Pokrovsk goes, the front line crumbles at that point. By the way, do you share that analysis? Is this place?
No, I don't. I don't share that. I mean, Ukraine has been battling on that sort of front and certainly in that area for almost the last 2 years, ever since the Russian invasion. And they've had ample time to put in stopgaps and resilience in case there's a catastrophic collapse on the Eastern Front. There are reserves. There are trained reserves available. There are defence lines. They've got a coping mechanism if the Russians break through. They've always had that ever since the invasion happened. So if there is a breakthrough, they've got other means. And in the final analysis, what Putin, of course, hopes is that they carry on grinding in the east, forcing Zelensky to pull his people out of Russia and redirect them around the east. And, of course, what's happened is setting foot in Russia proper, they've achieved this magnificent success, which they never expected.
It's a magnificent success for morale.
Yes,
I suppose.
Absolutely.
I mean, as you say, it doesn't appear to have been successful in one objective, which was to draw Russian troops away from the Eastern Front. It may have given Zelensky a bargaining chip if we come to peace talks.
Well, that's incredibly important.
After the American
have much
election.
to trade.
OK, well, we'll descant on that. Tell me a bit more about why that's so important, do you think?
Because at the moment, you know, he's got very little to trade. And all of a sudden, he's then got territory that he can trade that the Russians certainly want back. I mean, don't forget, Putin has tied his whole political being to the great patriotic war, the Second World War, and its achievement. And two things with Kursk. One, it was a great battle of the Second World War that the Soviets have won, and now the Ukrainians are setting foot in that place that was really a turning point of the Eastern Front in 1943. And secondly, the very fact that there are foreign boots on Russian soil is damaging Putin's reputation no end, so he's got to do something about it.
When you say no end, you don't literally mean no end, because so far his reputation, you know, in polling terms, such as they are, appears fairly resilient. I mean, he still apparently has massive support amongst the Russian people. So what damage do you think it has done his credibility or his followership? I think it's the inner circle are worried about where this is going. I mean, it's set a precedent. These are the first foreign boots in 79 years on Russian soil. And that doesn't look good, whatever the optics are. We have to take Russian opinion polls with a pinch of salt. Of course. I mean, they tell us what they want us to hear. And, you know, we know privately there's an awful lot of Russian angst and upset and disappointment and disillusionment with the war in the East, for which they see no end. And huge amounts of Russian people, far more Russians, conscripts, are being killed at the front than Ukrainian soldiers. And that has a derogatory effect on Russian morale. So, you know, that adds up to an uncomfortable package. And if we take the wider view, we have to remember that Putin has more armed military people involved in repressing dissent within Russia than he has deployed in Ukraine fighting the Ukrainians. And the more that balance is there, repressing, shutting down any kind of dissent, I mean, that is, A, detrimental to Mother Russia anyway, but B, you know, is a drain on the resources that you can otherwise employ on the front. The Russian soldiers who have been killed, they're coming from the further reaches of Russia, is that right, by and large? In other words, they're not brought from the metropolitan areas where the greatest dissent might be expressed. Correct, for the moment, but they're running out of those soldiers who are coming from, you know, further away in the Russian Federation, in the Asian provinces, in the oblasts. And, you know, sooner or later, he's going to have to draw on the European Russians. And they're the ones that he's keeping sweet, because they're the ones who are generating the money. They're the influential people in his inner circle. So, you know, this is by no means all going Putin's way. He's in a bind. He's got to do something. Time is ticking as well. I mean, the other thing is the Great Russian Winter is about to approach. So what Zelensky is trying to do is position himself for the winter, because then all the fighting shuts down for about 6 months. And so you know, if the Russians leave things as they're trying to break through, but if they don't, then Zelensky's off the hook for about 6 months. And Zelensky's vulnerable because his mandate as a president has run out. He was elected for 5 years. That expired in April. So he's now existing because there's martial law, and you can't change the president while there's martial law. So he's now more vulnerable than usual, and he's got to pull off some kind of spectacular win and keep it. And that's what he's achieved at the moment. So you don't think it's been an error at this point? Anyway, how vital is Storm Shadow, the partly British-supplied long-range
missile? Anglo-French missile. Long range, 300 miles, I think introduced in your time.
And devastating.
Absolutely. And the Brits have said you can use it against Russian targets in Ukraine, but not in Russia. And I think the Belgians who use it as well have said exactly the same, and the French. So there's this wonderful missile that they're not able to deploy outside Ukraine. And to me, that's a fatal flaw, because actually we do need to let them use that to do what it was designed to do. I mean, what it's got is a super warhead that drills through concrete and can destroy command centres and things like that. And to stop them doing it, to stop them using it, is fear of escalation. Fine, but Ukraine has now escalated by going into Russia. So we've now actually hit a unique turning point in this war on the Eastern Front between Ukraine and Russia. probably for the first time, it's a major turning point. And I'm not sure we've sat up and recognised it.
No.
It's not just a dalliance in the east in a sort of small bulge into Russian territory.
And I'm grateful to you for underlining that and also underlining the importance of the decision which lies with Europeans as to whether Storm Shadow can be used. Thank you very much indeed, Peter Caddick-Adams. Well, still ahead, we'll be whisked away to the stage with Stefan Kyriazis. This week he's been to see a reenactment of Janis Joplin in her crazy heyday, and he's seen also the National Ballet of Georgia delicately dancing Swan Lake. Stay with us.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Susie, let's start with you, and you will say that being a mum is the equivalent of a second full-time job.
Yeah, I mean, I think any mum would say that. But, you know, it's a massive privilege to be a mother. It's a massive privilege to, to have children. But it's an incredible amount of work. Most people would argue that you are, it's a privilege and you don't do it for this, but actually you are contributing to the economy because you're also producing the future people that are going to go into work.
If men were doing the lion's share of the childcare as well, everyone would know about it, but women don't shout about it. They put up and get on with it. But times are changing, aren't they, Reem? And I think, there's nobody here suggesting that women need special favours, but they need to have certain understanding within the workplace. There's arguments, isn't there, for Pregnant Then Screwed, who's campaigning 100% for meritocracy, but they want to see things like flexible working so that women can work around childcare responsibilities, and they want to be able to make sure that women aren't squeezed out of the labour market because they simply can't juggle both things.
Absolutely. I mean, look, being a mother is one of the most incredible things that any woman can do. And I think it's wonderful that so many women are able to work and have children. I think it's wonderful. I think we should have the utmost respect for every single woman that is able to balance and juggle all of that. However, I think we need to be having these conversations about how best employers can cater towards different people's needs. We want to be encouraging parents to be working as well as having children and contributing to the economy. But it is incredibly unfair if we begin to give those particular people preferential treatment in the workplace. And I think that some of their childless colleagues will begin to resent them.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, Janis Joplin shot to fame in 1967, but after releasing 3 albums, she was dead 3 years later at the age of 27, having overdosed on heroin. Such a brief career might seem meagre material for a stage show, but I await the judgment of arts editor of the Daily Express, Stefan Kyriazis, who joins me now. Stefan, give me a piece of your heart.
Oh, Mike, it's all yours. You know this. Yes, very, very brief life, but towering influence. People like Pink in the modern day have said that she is the influence. But she was around so briefly, I guess, burned very brightly and a very troubled soul. And what we've got is A Night with Janis Joplin, the musical. And I think a lot of the problems, it's been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. So we've got a little bit of a clip to give you an idea of what it's like, because you're going to find out, absolutely loved it. But just take a look at this and sort of brace yourselves for the madness of Janis in action.
Down on
makes you feel good.
Performance. It's by, who's that?
Staggering. Now, that is Mary Bridget Davies. She's been playing this role. She's been playing Janis on and off since 2005 in other shows. She's also fronted Big Brother and the Holding Company, which was Janis's band that she was part of with her first 2 albums. So she has the chops. I mean, you can hear that does it no justice at all.
Really?
It's staggering, stunning in an audience. And I have to say, sensational, superb backing band, especially the guy on the electric guitar with numerous solos, but also 4 backing girls, which we'll get to. So what we have is a night with. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage, she's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories, thoughts on life.
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think they're a mistake calling it the musical. I think they should call it the show or the performance or something, because she talks about the blues, she talks about her youth, she talks about who she was in the sense of she gives so much away on the stage, which makes her feel alive, but eventually she says there'll be nothing left for Janis. And the show has the absolute backing of her brother and sister who came on stage on press night. So it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues. And she was inspired all the way through her life by people like Nina Simone, Etta James, Aretha Franklin. We get little imaginary performances from the 4 backing girls doing them. Staggering again, absolutely stunning. We get one moment when all 4 come together and do Still Waters Run Deep, which blew the roof off a standing ovation. There were numerous standing ovations in this show. And then we get a moment...
Which is kind of more important than what the critics say, isn't it?
It is, as long as you go in knowing what you're getting. And I'm not a massive fan of jukebox musicals because they often feel like a bit of a Wikipedia entry. It's a bit like, and then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, here's a song that's kind of cranked in. And some of them absolutely are great. The Tina one is fantastic. But here, I just thought it's as if she's incarnated for a night. The performances are stunning, all of the performances, not just Mary in the lead. But I took a friend who's a huge fan, and she just sighed next to me and went, this is just like seeing her live. It's one of those things. I don't know a lot about her. Came out absolutely stunned when I looked her up, listened to the music.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in London.
Quite a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue. I mean, when they really go for it, they sort of blow the roof, but you're still sort of all in seats, a bit politely like an audience, until they actually get us up. But I would prefer to see it in a smaller cabaret version. But I cannot recommend the performances highly enough. If you just want to hear incredible performances, voices, musicianship, it's stunning. I recommend.
Right. Interesting, outstanding review, and not entirely consonant with all the other reviews that are being. You're out a bit on a limb there, but possibly. Now, you and I quite often talk about Swan Lake. We're going to talk about it again. But this time it's the Georgian National Ballet.
Yes, so this is the State Ballet of Georgia, which has been going on and off, I think, for about 175 years, but it's gone through a bit of a revival in the last 20 years. So it came to London with very big expectations. It's under the baton of Nina Ananiashvili. I think I got that right. She was a huge Bolshoi star and then went on to the American Ballet Theatre. She went back to her native Georgia at the invitation of the president to revive the ballet. So this is their first proper visit to the UK. Again, we've got a little bit of a clip of them in action.
Let us watch that. OK, so that looked pretty traditional to me. It might be worth saying that we might expect around this time of year a visit from Russia or from Ukraine, but obviously for political reasons we don't get that. So we have Georgia instead. I think one of the reviews said to me, you know, traditional, thoroughly competent, and rather lacking in passion
Yes.
Did you have that feeling?
My note here says, in context, we miss the Russians.
In context,
I found it, in my review, soporific. I found it dull, staid, slow, and crucially for me, and most of the critics did agree, although because they're sort of highbrow dance critics, they're a little bit kinder, possibly, than I am. It lacked musicality, so there was a disconnect between the conductor and the people on stage, which drives me mad. When you hit the final beat and you do the pose, quite a few times they were out of time. Messy lines in the group sections, legs and arms at different heights, timing's a little bit off, a few stumbles. I did see the first night, so it's understandable, but that was the press night. And I found it disappointing. But Nina, the director, she's known for kind of naturalism, for being very expressive, very dynamic. This was the opposite. No chemistry at all between the two leads, and some really poor lifts where I could see the main guy lifting the lead ballerina over the head, and as she came down, she sort of onto his shoulder, onto his hip, onto his knee, and down. And you shouldn't see anything like this in ballet. It should just flow beautifully. A very dear friend of mine, who's also a critic, mentioned his turnout, so I had to double-check that I knew what that meant, and I did notice it as well. That beautiful way that men walk, and they sort of point out with their toe as they walk.
Yes.
The principal man did not do this. So I just was very disappointed. And knowing her reputation from the past, I feel like she should have been more on top of it. They did their best. It was a very, very competent sort of dancing, but no, really disappointing.
I'm going to close you down there. Is it at the Colosseum?
This one is on at the Colosseum. It's just on for another week until September the 8th.
Slightly disappointing, that.
Yes.
And thank you very much indeed, Stefan Kyriazis. You're watching Michael Portillo on GB News, Britain's news channel. That concludes the first hour of the programme, but please don't go away, as after the break we'll be transported to Britain's youngest summer opera festival. Quite differently, a former FBI agent will dissect whether the US Secret Service let down President Trump and public safety when someone shot Donald Trump. And in our Taste of Britain, we'll be toasting Classique Day. See you then.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Through the day today, we'll see a mixture of fairly warm sunshine, particularly towards the south-east of the UK, some thunderstorms also developing, and quite a humid feel to the weather, again, particularly towards the south and south-east. So looking at detail for today then, confirmation of some showers already breaking out this morning across some central and southern parts of England. As we go through the day, they'll become more extensive across parts of the Midlands, eventually building across parts of northern England too into the afternoon. So it's the north and northwest of the UK and across some western spots seeing the best of the lingering brightness into the afternoon. A few lighter showers here, but with those thundery downpours we could see some flooding issues, as I say, particularly across the central spine of the UK. Temperatures peaking in the southeast at 27 Celsius and a very humid feel to the day here. So to end the day, across the north and northwest of the UK, we'll hold on to some sunshine towards the northwest of Scotland. A few showers starting to push up from the south into central, southern and eastern parts of Scotland there. One or two showers also across Northern Ireland, although the bulk of the end of the afternoon here set fair. Heading further south, more in the way of cloud generally across England and Wales. Again, there'll still be some heavy, even thundery showers in places, particularly across the Midlands up into northern parts of England, with perhaps the far south and southeast starting to see those showers easing. Heading through the evening then into the overnight period, those showers continue their journey northwards into parts of eastern Scotland into the early hours of Monday. Meanwhile, a band of more general rain working in across some western and southwestern parts, with the clearest skies there in the central spine of the UK. A very muggy night to come across the UK on Sunday night. Temperatures no lower than the low to mid-teens, even upper teens across the south and southeast of the UK. Monday looks a very unsettled day, unfortunately, across the whole of the UK. Low pressure in charge, giving showers or longer spells of rain. Still some thunderstorms in places towards the far northeast for a time, and fresher air moving in across Northern Ireland later. Temperatures here up to 18 Celsius, nearer 22 or 23 Celsius down towards the southeast in the afternoon. 23 there in London is 73 in Fahrenheit, and I say close to the seasonal average. That's pretty much it for me. See you soon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo on GB News, and welcome to the first afternoon of September. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to the nation from the Rose Garden at 10 Downing Street. He pointed out that Boris Johnson had had drinks with staff there during the pandemic. And then he seemed surprised when journalists pointed out that a Labour donor, Lord Wahid Ali, had been granted a pass to Downing Street that had enabled him to hold a party for Labour supporters in that very garden. I will ask whether the civil service blob is happy to have Labour back. My political panel will opine. 2 months from the recent attempt on Donald Trump's life, Catherine Schweit, a former FBI agent specialising in active shooter incidents, will discuss how the FBI investigates assassination attempts against public figures and the implications for public safety. For the perfect, quintessential English summer evening of divine music in exquisite gardens, a happy few have ventured over to this year's Waterbury Opera Festival in Oxfordshire. I'll be joined by the chief classical music critic at The Spectator, Richard Bratby, for his review. And finally, in our Taste of Britain, we'll be celebrating Cup Classique Day, which will toast the start of a sparkling September. All of that lies ahead, but first, your headlines with Sam Francis.
Michael, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to you. Just after 12 o'clock. Well, we'll start this hour with just a breaking line coming to us from Chesterfield that a small aircraft has reportedly crashed into an industrial estate in Chesterfield this morning. We don't yet have pictures of that incident. If we do get hold of those, we will, of course, bring them to you. But at this stage, emergency services on the scene, roads closed north of the city. And we believe the plane's last signal was received just after 8 o'clock this morning, 8:03 exactly. Still unclear at this stage if there are any injuries. And 3 fire crews at least in attendance, police urging people to avoid the area. They're also saying those roads that are closed, they do expect will be closed for some time. So that latest news just coming to us from Chesterfield this morning. In other news, Israel has said it has recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who had been held by Hamas since the attacks there on the 7th of October. They were found in tunnels in south of Gaza. The country's military believes they'd been killed shortly before they were discovered. US President Joe Biden says he's devastated and outraged by the news, while the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he won't rest until those responsible are caught. Well, staying with news overseas, and Ukraine has launched a wave of drone attacks targeting Russian power stations and oil refineries, sparking fires. You can see here some of the mobile phone footage just make out there some thick smoke and flames engulfing one of those sites near Moscow. Russia claims air defences have destroyed more than 150 Ukrainian drones during those latest air attacks. Here, the head of the police watchdog in England and Wales claims the criminal justice system is dysfunctional. Andy Cook told the Sunday Telegraph that too often officers are getting the basics wrong. He's also described the lack of prison places as a nightmare. Speaking on the Camilla Tominey show this morning, Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly said we need to get back to the cornerstone of British policing.
They need to focus on the crimes that affect people's everyday lives. When I was Home Secretary, I made it absolutely clear they were to pursue all reasonable lines of inquiry. They were to crack down on shoplifting. This idea there was a £200 limit, get rid of that, because if you don't crack down on the small crimes, those criminals get more and more severe, and then you have a real problem.
James Cleverly there, the Shadow Home Secretary. Well, Robert Jenrick is officially launching his bid to become the next Conservative leader. He claims that Labour are laying the groundwork for huge tax rises. He's currently being introduced at that live event in Westminster. And the former Immigration Minister says he also wants to put Nigel Farage's Reform UK out of business. Well, Robert Jenrick is one of 6 candidates in the running to replace Rishi Sunak, including James Cleverly, Kemi Badenoch, Mel Stride, Dame Priti Patel and Tom Tugendhat. Police are pushing to get charges upgraded against 2 men who are accused of separate attacks at the Notting Hill Carnival. Both victims have now sadly died, leading to police to launch murder investigations. One was a mother, you can see there on the screen. She was stabbed in front of her young child at that event, while the other was a chef who worked with Gordon Ramsay. The Shadow Home Secretary has called the news deeply distressing and shocking. Floral tributes have been left outside a home in Staines where 3 children and a man have been found dead. Neighbours have told local media they believe a young family with twins lived at the house. Surrey police have confirmed they're not seeking anyone else in connection with the incident, which is now under investigation. And the force has also referred itself to the police watchdog due to having prior contact with those involved. An absence epidemic, that's how the Education Secretary has described the number of pupils missing schools. Bridget Phillipson claims too many mums and dads are letting kids skip school for holidays, birthdays, or she says even a runny nose. The government's crackdown aims to tackle the growing issue as the new school year begins. And finally, some good news from the Paralympics. Great Britain's Ben Pritchard has won rowing gold in the PR1 men's single sculls rowing. The Welshman charged to victory over the last 500 metres, and his win is Britain's first in the division since Tom Agar's gold in the 2008 Games in Beijing. Big congratulations to Ben Pritchard. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam Francis. So Keir Starmer's speech in the Rose Garden of the Prime Minister's official residence in London was somewhat marred by questions from the media about Labour cronyism, with Labour supporters given official passes and paid public positions. Now, commenting on this, the former Cabinet Secretary, Lord Gus O'Donnell, thought that the new Labour government had no case to answer. Whilst proclaiming the independence of the civil service, he attacked the Conservative government for subverting relations with civil servants, and in particular for calling into question the rule of law as he saw it by considering Britain's withdrawal from the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights. And this made me wonder whether the civil service really is impartial at all. Was leaving the European Union the sin against the Grail as far as the civil service blob was concerned? Are they delighted to have Labour back, which is pro-EU, pro-ECHR, and not very bothered about migration? I'm rejoined now by Aubrey Allegretti, Baroness Claire Fox and Alice Grant. Claire, in your extraordinary career, you have been, amongst other things, a UKIP MEP.
Oh, not UKIP.
Brexit Party.
Oh, Brexit Party. I beg your pardon. I shouldn't have got that wrong. Brexit Party.
Very big important distinction.
Now, do you have a feeling that leaving the EU was the sin against the Grail as far as the civil service establishment is concerned?
It's not even just my feeling, is it? I mean, we were actually told by somebody from the House of Lords who was very senior in the Foreign Office that he went in the morning after the announcement of the decision to leave and reassured everybody that although everyone was devastated and that he himself was devastated, that, you know, we'd get through. And there were people crying. He actually admitted that. So, I mean, I think we can safely say that that indicated a partial response to Brexit. Everybody that's commented and worked at the heart of government and tried to implement Brexit has noted that there's been barriers put up by the civil service. So I think there was definitely something in that. But partial civil service is, you can be lazy, just blame the blob for everything. I did get irritated when government ministers, when they were Conservative, would do that. But I also had a lot of sympathy, having had now some experience in Parliament, of feeling as though there's a very politicised civil service that's existed. I'm particularly interested in issues around sex and gender, for example, around the equity, diversity and inclusion agenda, and they're quite openly political, partial, one-sided organising mechanisms behind the scenes that actually get in the way of fair advice to ministers in instances. We've had civil servants tell us that as whistleblowers. We've got a special group who've had to organise secretly of civil servants themselves, complaining they're bullied if they've got the wrong position on whether it's critical race theory or sex and gender. So I think there is a case to answer here, and now we have Keir Starmer, and I do think this is extraordinary, who is, the administration has appointed people in what can only be seen as a march through the institutions, you know, muddling up political appointments. Even somebody who is going to be judging propriety and standards is actually being questioned. And so I think that is going to leave a nasty taste in the mouths of anybody observing it. And the two Keir Starmer impression of there's one rule for them and one rule for us, and the civil service being deployed by a government on their side, I find nerve-wracking and worrying politically.
Aubrey, despite what Claire has just said, as I mentioned, when Gus O'Donnell, the former Cabinet Secretary, was interviewed about this, he really thought there was nothing strange about these appointments, the pass being given to Lord Ali, and a couple of appointments of Labour supporters, people who come from Labour think tanks, to official positions. Not special advisor positions, but actually government jobs. Did you think there was something odd about this?
I think Labour has made a rod for its own back by, when it was in opposition, appearing to be slightly holier than thou, and therefore when they got into government, there was an expectation that they would have to be, if you like, whiter than white, that they just couldn't even give the slightest of impressions that there might be anything untoward about what they were doing in terms of these hires into the civil service or the pass for the Labour peer that you talked about. Now, obviously, the issue they've got is that people will hold them up to very, very high standards. And they're discovering that, you know, it's very easy to sort of throw stones, but less easy when you're in government to justify and take the criticism.
I don't know whether you were in the Rose Garden. I bet you were.
I wasn't, sadly.
You weren't, sadly. But was it not curious that Keir Starmer, in part of his speech, said, you know, that the Rose Garden has been taken back to the nation, it's been recovered for the nation, and yet actually it had been used a few days before for a Labour Party celebration. I mean, the accusation against Boris Johnson was not, remember, a party political thing. It was that he was defying the lockdown regulations. But he wasn't being accused of having a party political party in the Rose Garden. Labour has done that and thinks that's perfectly all right.
Well, I suppose, you know, the two examples are quite different. On the one hand, you're talking about a gathering which, if it wasn't necessary for the purposes of work, would have been banned and the rest of us would have all been fined for breaking the law. And on the other hand, in terms of what Labour did, allowing a Labour peer, who is also obviously a significant donor, to host a party there. Now, we don't know exactly what role he performed, and I think it's more of the sort of cover-up that's got them. Not that they've tried to cover it up, but they've been elusive about what he was doing.
And I'm sure there have been any number of political events under both parties at 10 Downing Street. What was just rather odd was that Keir Starmer had gone out of his way to say that the garden had been recovered for the nation, when actually it was doing its bit for the Labour Party. Alice, what is your reaction to the general point that I was discussing with Claire, really, about where we stand? I mean, now that, as Gus O'Donnell, the former Cabinet Secretary, would see it, he would say, well, now that we've got a government that isn't sort of busily, day by day, undermining the civil service, and now they've got a government that isn't challenging the ECHR, which, in his view, brings into question the whole rule of law and democracy, legitimacy of institutions, etc. Now all that has passed, Gus O'Donnell might say, we can go back to normal relations between an impartial civil service and a government that does business with them in a business-like manner. What do you make of this reading?
Well, that's absolutely not the case. I mean, our constitution is built on several principles, one of them being the rule of law, which, by the way, is very much challenged by the ECHR, the Convention on Human Rights, because we've never developed a constitution that needs that sort of bill to be enforced on us. We have the practical justice of common law, which enshrines our rights as it is. And the second thing is government by consent, which is hugely important, and that's, the bedrock of our democracy. And I think the civil service, which is a bloated, bureaucratic organisation which is increasingly frustrating government, and on top of that, all the several other entities. There are 400 public bodies to which are delegated different areas of policy making and government. We no longer have an executive and a parliament which are really the central tenets of our democracy, but in fact what we're seeing is the gradual evolution of this into something quite different, and I think that's what fundamentally undermines our constitution at the moment. And of course, we shouldn't be surprised that Labour not only have their sort of tentacles in these institutions as it is, and that's how they've been able to affect so much social change through these bodies over the years, because of course a lot of this was started by Tony Blair in the 1990s and in the early 2000s under Gordon Brown, and the point is that they did this on purpose. They could affect very long-term constitutional change in our nation without having to have their elected representatives in Parliament there. I mean, we all know that there's a crisis at the moment with so many different ideas. Claire mentioned critical race theory, all these, gender relations. I mean, that has, the reason why that these ideas have been able to diffuse so rapidly into our society are because so many public bodies are pushing them. And a lot of these bodies were created, as I said, under Labour governments. And I think Keir Starmer will only push further for this. And of course, it suits him very much and it suits the Labour agenda. But I think what we're really seeing here is the need to defend our original constitution and our original principles, which are firmly that we hold our elected leaders accountable, and people who are not accountable and cannot be held accountable, like civil servants, have no place in enacting policy which will affect us.
I mean, Claire, in a previous item, you were quite critical of the Conservative government. Do you think the Conservatives behaved badly towards the civil service? I must say, as a former Cabinet Minister, I was quite dismayed at the poor relations between ministers and civil servants during the last Conservative government. It was difficult for me to apportion blame because I wasn't there, but maybe it occurred to me that blame might be shared between a civil service that had perhaps become more politicised, but ministers perhaps who'd forgotten good manners and proper procedures.
Yeah, that's why I made reference to the blame the blob lazy meme that did a lot of work on behalf of ministers who wouldn't take responsibility for their own indecision or cowardice. This was under Conservatives, and were far too easily able to say, oh, well, we really would do something about the small boats crisis, or we really would do something about this. But the problem is all these civil servants are in the way. And you think, well, you're in charge, do something about it. And, well, what can we do? They keep stopping us. And I think that was dangerous. I also think that was used as an excuse for delays in relation to Brexit, that somehow the civil service service were to blame. That's not to say, however, that I think that Gus O'Donnell hasn't revealed something very important, which is he says, oh, it's all gone back to proper politics as we love it. And when he said about the ECHR, I was thinking, well, say you had a government who was elected who did decide to abolish the ECHR, which they would be entitled to.
Our acceptance of jurisdiction.
Would then you say, oh, no, that's wrong, and you're a civil servant. So I think there is a fracture between a lot of the thinking around civil service and public bodies, which was that we had a Baden kind of prime minister, or the Tories were kind of not doing the right thing, and they feel much more sympathetic to the politics of the Labour Party. But I also don't want to be lazy about blaming the civil service. Can I just point out, because I think it would be wrong not to, you know, I was appointed to the House of Lords, unelected, by Boris Johnson, right? And it's not as though the Tory, I mean, not as a Tory, I hasten to add, but what I'm saying is the Conservative government, all governments do place people in positions for reasons. You know, I was because I was Brexit, even if I was a lefty Brexiteer, and it was for the Red Wall. And therefore, I don't want to overdo it. I understand political appointments. That's all I'm saying, right? I'm not going to come here and say, well, the Labour Party are making political appointments. How atrocious. What I'm concerned about, though, is the neutrality and impartiality of the civil service, which I think has become very politicised, not by governments, but by being allowed to, and governments not having the courage to stop it.
Thank you very much. Aubrey and Alice, we're running out of time a bit, but let's have a last reflection from each of you, please. Aubrey, do you think that the civil service heaved a sigh of relief when Labour returned?
I think it's quite interesting, actually, to look at the reflections of the outgoing Conservative administration on how they found the civil servants that they worked with. James Cleverly this morning, I think, gave an interview to the Sunday Times where he was effectively saying bad ministers blame the civil service, as Claire was saying, for their own laziness or lack of will to do things. And there's another interesting blog written by a former Conservative special advisor at the Department for Education.
Very interesting point. What was the answer to my question? Did they heave a sigh of relief?
Well, I think all of the evidence suggests from the outgoing Conservatives that they didn't have this huge systemic structural problem with the civil service. And so actually I don't think the civil servants would have felt, you know, that a huge weight has been lifted from their shoulders.
I understand. And Alice, what do you think?
Well, I also agree that I don't think blame can be entirely shifted on the civil service. Our ministers do have a lot to be held accountable for, but it is also clear, I mean, speaking from an ex-Prime Minister, Liz Truss, when she gave an interview with The Sun, she mentioned how impossible it was to actually get things done because of the bureaucracy. I think we can all see that we are living in a society which is becoming increasingly bureaucratic. It's increasingly difficult to get things done. So, you know, I think we do need a shift from bureaucracy and technocracy to, again, ministers being held more accountable, because then they can resign when they've done something wrong. Ministerial responsibility was a massive thing before. It's become less and less over the years. It's important our ministers are the ones who can be held accountable for their own mistakes. And by that, perhaps the civil service needs to be reevaluated.
Thank you very much. And we can bring our two topics with the panel together, really, by saying that, you know, if Labour tries to reform, let's say Wes Streeting tries to reform the National Health Service, we'll see how he gets on with the bureaucracy of the civil service and, of course, of the NHS. That's Aubrey Allegretti, Baroness Claire Fox and Alice Grant. Thank you to you all. 2 months on from the recent assassination attempt on the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, a former FBI special agent in charge of the active shooting programme, Catherine Schweit, will join me to dissect the FBI's investigative process, the protective measures of the US Secret Service, and the psychology of crowds during such moments of panic. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Luis Elizondo says that he worked at the Pentagon and that he knows that they have recovered material that is not from this Earth. He resigned after believing his government wasn't taking the threat of UFOs seriously. So have they been covering up alien material from us?
I don't think the claims that are being made in Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, are new. But I think what we have to pay attention to is the seniority of, one, Luis Elizondo, and two, the people who recruited him, and indeed the people he worked for, which was the Department of Defense and the Pentagon.
You think that he was in a position to know about this?
Yeah, he would have been. He would have been speaking to the individuals who were taking part in these investigations. You're showing some of those clips just now that potential incursions by objects controlled by a non-human intelligence, potentially. We're not saying alien necessarily, but something non-human.
Seems a bit far-fetched to me, Andrew. I'm a sceptic.
When people say sceptical, I think as a species, we're relatively new in terms of what we do in space. But right now, we've got a robot on Mars that drives about and has a little helicopter drone that every so often comes up, flies about away 10 feet from it to collect samples and comes back. Now, a species a couple of hundred years down the line from us would have far better technology than that. So who's to say what we're encountering aren't just really advanced probes from something else that's just slightly ahead of us in the technological scale? I don't think that's too far stretch of the imagination.
When you do see things like what we just saw there, which was made public, the New York Times did a big expose on all of this, and actually, you know, the world didn't end. We weren't all outside fighting each other for scraps of food and burning down the nearest Lidl, were we? We just thought, oh, that's quite cool.
I think now we have to look at it and maybe take a step back, look at the people coming out now, talking about UFOs and thinking, is there something to this that we've maybe been overlooking?
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. On the 13th of July of this year, there was an assassination attempt made on the life of President Donald Trump, the former president, involving a shooter on a roof, and that's led to a number of questions about the level of security that was provided by the Secret Service. Those questions will be at the heart of the continued FBI investigation into alleged multiple failures by the service and by others in the lead up to the shooting. And to discuss that further, I'm joined now by Catherine Schweit, a former Federal Bureau of Investigation special agent in charge of its active shooter program, and she joins me from Washington, D.C. Catherine, welcome to the program. Welcome to GB News.
Good morning, Michael. Good morning. I wish I was sitting on that couch.
I wish you were here too. I wish so. Tell me a bit about the work that you did in the FBI and how it's relevant to this consideration of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Sure. I had spent 20 years in the FBI and still work on the things that I had worked on at the FBI. And the last 5 of those years occurred after the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, where 20 children were killed and 6 women in a school. And I became part of the team that worked out of the White House with other federal agencies to see why it happened and what we could do. So that's really how I got into it. And that's pretty much all I've done since then. Even after I left, I continue to work on that in private practice.
I don't know how free you feel to comment, but obviously many people have said there must have been great failings by the Secret Service for Donald Trump to be shot. Let's remember that a bullet did actually hit him, and this came after a number of witnesses had drawn attention to the presence of a shooter on a roof within shooting distance of where he was addressing a rally. What would you expect to happen now? And by the way, what would be the role of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in looking into the conduct and performance of the Secret Service?
Well, that's a great question, because I think it's easy to kind of conflate everything together. But in fact, the Department of Homeland Security, which is another federal agency, is responsible for the Secret Service. The head of their agency, in fact, said that the shooting indicated that there was a failure in the Secret Service's part, and they actually are investigating the conduct of the individuals involved, the Secret Service agents involved, and kind of the scope of the security plan. I've worked on security plans for presidents before as part of that team. It's all hands on deck kind of situation. The FBI's responsibility, which is another federal agency under our Department of Justice, is responsible for investigating any assassination attempt. And of course, historically, right, we've had 4 assassinations in the United States: McKinley, Garfield, Lincoln, and Kennedy. But the assassination attempts are part of a federal crime, and therefore the FBI is responsible for doing the investigation. So we're kind of bifurcated in that way. But of course, while we put the our investigative skills to work, what we're doing is setting out a timeline and details of everything that happened. And then that will be used by so many others to determine, kind of the follow-on, basically. What happens to Secret Service, what happens to other agencies.
And are you willing to comment at the moment as to what you think did happen, and in particular, what you think went wrong?
Well, yes and no. Yes, certainly. There's no question that there was a failure. I mean, I work solely in the category of, mass public shootings right now. And so this is exactly the same situation. Somebody who comes in with a high-powered weapon and it tries to assassinate, tries to kill people. That is what we call an active shooter in the FBI in the United States. So what occurred, I think, we'll get all the details of it right now, but what we do know for sure is there was clearly a massive kind of security failure when it came to the organizational planning that would have allowed a shooter to get up on top of a building and be within range of somebody that is a protectee of the Secret Service. That's just, it's unacceptable.
What impact, Catherine, do you think that will have had on the morale and future conduct of the Secret Service?
I think that's a good question. I mean, it is a really tough blow. There is nothing that is, their entire job is to protect their protectee. That's their entire job. And every time they move an individual or they have that person static, like they did for Mr. Trump, he has to be in a situation, that person has to be in a situation where they don't worry about their safety because somebody else is. And it's not just one person, it's a bunch of people. And the Secret Service is responsible for ensuring not just the conduct of their employees, their officers, but their agents, but in fact, all their job is to have a plan for all of that protectee's movements. And clearly that didn't occur here, even if, I would say, when you work on a plan, if I could just back up, when you work on a plan for security, you start with who is the protectee, and then the Secret Service is responsible for the central location where that individual is. But they're also responsible for the broader plan. For example, we have an inauguration in January every 4 years in the United States. And after the inauguration, the swearing in of the President of the United States, that president moves down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. I'd love to tell you exactly how long it is. It's 1.5 miles or something like that. And that location where the president moves is anticipated. So we have to protect this huge bubble, right? The Secret Service officers are responsible for that whole plan, even though they don't put snipers on the rooftops, the FBI does, and other departments. That's really where I think the failing, the disappearance of responsibility here in terms of who dropped the ball, that connection between how far is the protectee, where the Secret Service officers were, and how did, just beyond that, did a sniper get on the roof without anybody seeing it happen?
Well, I think we certainly need to understand what went wrong, because otherwise it's difficult to have confidence. And we certainly want the candidates in this election in the United States to be protected. And we want the President of the United States after the election to be well protected too. Catherine Zweig, thank you so much.
There's no shortage of threats. I will say that. There's no shortage of threats on the president. So we want to make sure that the candidates are safe.
Thanks so much for being on GB News. Coming up, we'll reminisce about an ideal English summer's evening filled with beautiful music in stunning gardens as we hear of this year's Waterperry Opera Festival from Richard Bratby, the chief classical music critic of The Spectator. But first, we're going to hear your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 12:32 exactly, and the top story this hour, Israel says it has recovered the bodies of 6 hostages who had been held by Hamas since the 7th of October attacks. They were found in tunnels in southern Gaza. The country's military believes they had been killed shortly before they were discovered. US President Joe Biden says he's devastated and he's outraged by the news, while the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he won't rest until those responsible are caught. Here, the Education Secretary's warning parents who let their children skip classes could be costing them thousands of pounds in lost future earnings. Bridget Phillipson says there's an absence epidemic as schools in England and Wales prepare to welcome pupils back this week. Police are pushing to get charges upgraded against 2 men who were accused of separate attacks at the Notting Hill Carnival. Both victims have sadly now died, leading to police to launch murder investigations. The Home Secretary has called the news of those 2 deaths deeply distressing and shocking. Well, roads have been closed after a small aircraft has crashed at an industrial estate in Chesterfield. At this stage, no pictures coming into us. When we get those, we will bring them to you, but it's unclear if there are any injuries. Police and fire crews, though, are at that scene in Chesterfield. Meanwhile, Robert Jenrick is officially launching his bid to become the next Conservative leader, claiming that Labour's first budget will be, he says, a declaration of war on the middle classes. The former immigration minister is currently speaking, wrapping up his opening speech at that event in Westminster this afternoon. He has said that he also wants to put Nigel Farage's Reform UK out of business. He's one of 6 candidates in the running to replace Rishi Sunak ahead of the first round of MP voting taking place on Wednesday this week, where it will cut down from 6 contenders to 4. The Met Office has extended a yellow weather warning across large parts of the UK. We're being warned that heavy rain, thunder and lightning could cause disruption in parts of Scotland, Wales and England right through until midnight tomorrow. And finally, Great Britain's Ben Pritchard has won Paralympic rowing gold in the PR1 men's singles sculls. The Welshman charged to victory over the last 500 metres. And Pritchard's win is Britain's first in the division since Tom Agar's gold at the 2008 Games in Beijing. Those are the latest headlines. I'll have a full roundup for you at 1 o'clock. Michael back next after this short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. It remains unsettled through the rest of Sunday. Some thunderstorms around, warm and humid, particularly towards the southeast, and rather cloudy overall, but there will be some sunny spells. Looking at the bigger picture, high pressure moves away, low pressure generally dominates, and we'll see some hefty showers developing, some thunderstorms, some local disruption possible, particularly across parts of England and Wales today and southern parts of Scotland. Central, southern and eastern areas seeing some thunderstorms push northwards through this afternoon, but elsewhere we could also see the odd thunderstorm. Quite a lot of cloud around, but there will be some sunny spells, best of the drier, brighter weather across parts of Scotland, perhaps Northern Ireland, but still cloudy here. Fairly fresh, 15 to 17 Celsius. Humid towards the southeast, highs approaching 27 or 28 degrees. As we move through into the evening time, you can see there's still some glimmers of brightness across northern Scotland to end the day here. Temperatures around 19, 20 Celsius. Cooler across central belt here. We could see temperatures 15 to 17. Cloudy cloudy across Northern Ireland. The risk of thundery showers across England and Wales. We could see 30 to 50 millimetres of rain in short periods of time, and Met Office warning through the day out across many areas. And then as we head through the evening and overnight, thunderstorms pushing northwards into southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Further thundery showers developing across the east. And then this weather front bringing outbreaks of rain into parts of Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. A warm and muggy night for everyone. Temperatures the mid to high teens. Taking us into Monday morning, a mixed picture. A lot of cloud around, thundery rain in places, some heavy downpours developing, hail and lightning also a risk. And through the day, the showers just continue to push north and eastwards, focusing across eastern parts of Scotland, also central parts of the UK as well. Temperatures down a little, but still feeling quite muggy towards the southeast. Highs here around 24, possibly 25.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained. I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to the programme, and we're returning to the subject of culture. Founded in 2017, the Waterperry Opera Festival in Oxfordshire focuses on bridging the gap between artists and audiences, welcoming families, young and old, children and classical music newcomers. Over the course of 6 years, the festival has staged 32 productions for more than 17,500 attendees. This year's festival presented 3 operas. It's against the backdrop of Waterperry House, and it's in the festival's 300-seater auditorium in the Gardens. I'm joined now by Richard Bratby, the chief classical music critic of The Spectator, who's enjoyed the Waterperry productions of Barbara of Seville and Turn of the Screw. Richard, welcome to the programme. We have this proliferation of country house operas during the summer season in Britain. It's very welcome to me. But what is driving that, do you think? Is it demand by audiences, or is it perhaps also the copious availability of young operatic talent? Why are we getting so much opera festival music in the summer?
It's a good question. I think it's one of these very British compromises. You know, we perhaps we're not so keen on opera in the sort of conventional sense of galas in the winter, you know, the big opera houses of the dressing up, all those stereotypes. But the idea of doing it with a picnic in a nice garden on a warm or possibly slightly drizzly summer evening somehow appeals to something very British. I think something very it's the way we like to take our culture, and it seems to really catch on. I mean, I'm sure you know, it all started at Glyndebourne before the war, down in Sussex, this manor house where the Christie family decided to invite some German refugees to put on Mozart, and that went so well they now have a full-scale theatre there, and this idea has sort of really boomed in the last 20-30 years. This discovery that if you combine opera with a pleasant night out, a very English night out, quite often elements of picnicking, you know, a beautiful location, a leisurely pace, a sort of chance to show off, perhaps dress up a bit. You don't have to, but quite often people do, just to make a night of it. It kind of somehow it helps the cultural medicine go down in a way. And
yes,
and as we all know, our musicians tend to be available in the summer as well. It's a win for everyone, really.
Now, the various opera festivals that have grown up have become more sophisticated over the years, in the sense that they've developed proper buildings. I mean, for example, Glyndebourne now has an outstanding theatre. But where you've just been, Waterperry, in fact, you're still out in the open air. The audience is still out in the open air, and therefore you've got the terrific risk of rain. What was your luck?
Well, I went on 2 nights. One night we went to see Britain's Turn of the Screw. They have a sort of amphitheatre, which curiously enough is located in the middle of a garden centre. I mean, it's all part of the charm for me. That night it was a beautiful, glorious, sunny summer August evening. You can see bats flitting around. It's gorgeous. The sun gradually sank. Lovely, perfect. A little bit chilly later on. We had blankets. Didn't matter. The other night we went to see the Barber of Seville. That's on the lawn in front of the main house, and it's completely uncovered. The orchestra have a bit of cover because obviously instruments are valuable things. But everyone else, the performers and the audience, we were out there at the risk of the weather, and it did kind of look for a while like it was about to start raining. In classic English, again, late summer evening, and I said to the staff, well, what if it rains? So I said, well. Kind of hope it doesn't. And then it did start spitting down, and they're all hands-on. The entire sort of team there were out there with towels, mopping down the seats so we didn't have to sit on wet plastic seats. And they're dishing out plastic ponchos if you wanted them. I didn't avail myself of one of those. I feel I ought to suffer for art. But actually, the rain. Yeah, it kind of in that English way. You never quite know: is it going to set in all afternoon to be a washout, or is it actually just passed over 10 minutes before it started? Skies cleared, and there we were. And it was the staff had done everything they could. I mean, there's a limit to what they could do. Clearly, with no roof. I don't know what would have happened if it drizzled all evening.
Richard, even if the setting is in a way a little bit rudimentary, I think you found the standard of the opera very high. Did you not? Tell me about that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, what struck me particularly is the staff, the management, the artists, are remarkably young. These seem to be people in their 20s, early 30s, and as I understand it, they are basically a group of young professional classical musicians, producers, designers, directors, administrators, got together. So, well, instead of sitting around waiting for someone to give us a job for us to break it to big time, let's just put on our own festival. With the people we know, let's put on a show right here. I mean, it had that kind of feel about it, but the standard was sky high. I mean,
sky high.
Britain's opera. Absolutely. I mean, in as far as, the limitations of being outdoors, obviously it's never perfect. Acoustics are never perfect in a setting like that. But this amphitheatre of theirs was surprisingly good. And the wonderful thing is, I mean, Britain's The Turn of the Screw, as you may know, it's an opera. It has two roles for children. They were both fantastic. But the main character is a young woman of about 19 or 20 who's going to be a governess. And I don't know the age of the singer, Charlotte Bowden, who sang the role, but she was certainly... looked the part, put it that way, which is not always the case, say, at Covent Garden or the Colosseum. It felt like a youthful cast who were absolutely inhabiting those roles. It had that extra layer of believability. Likewise, in Marriage of Figaro, it's not the Marriage of Figaro, I'm sorry. It was the Barber of Seville.
Barber of Seville.
The prequel to Marriage of Figaro. But it's another opera about young people having a good time, really. And there we had young people having a good time, glorious voices. I mean, these are, I'd happily heard them any national opera house, and slightly small orchestra because you're outdoors, and I guess there's budget constraints as well. But you don't kind of notice that. It's like a picnic. If you're out there on a summer night, the sun's there, the company's good. You don't worry too much about the vintage of the wine, do you? It all tastes great.
Richard, thank you very much for drawing my attention to this. So the Waterbury Opera Festival is every August. It's over for this year, beyond next year. I put myself on the mailing list today, and if people are wondering, it's extremely near the city of Oxford. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Bratby. After the break, we'll be raising a glass as we celebrate Cup Classique Day with Jessica Summer. Don't go away.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With record temperatures expected this week, how do zoos keep their cooler creatures cold? Well, at Yorkshire Wildlife Park, the polar bears are enjoying a vegetable ice block.
Polar bears, they do have quite a variety of different temperatures that they naturally do find. Once they're moving off these polar ice caps, they are in the likes of down in the areas of Canada, Hudson Bay. Naturally, they were finding polar bears in 35-degree temperatures year upon year. So they are very much used to warm temperatures and heat waves as such. What you'll tend to find is they'll go for a good swim and then go for a snooze in the shade thereafter.
Not wanting to miss out, the sea lions are treated to a huge fish lolly.
In the hot weather, it's really important to give them ice because these guys, they don't drink salt water. These pools are actually saltwater pools. They actually drink fresh water. They've got 2 freshwater pools in their house, but again, being able to provide that in their outside enclosure is also really important. So offering them ice with their fish is not only enriching, but it's actually beneficial to their welfare as well.
Other animals like the lemurs will be basking in the sun, but also cooling down with frozen sweet potato.
So we've got 3 different species of lemur here. They come in all different shapes, colours, sizes, but they are native to Madagascar. Madagascar can get quite hot, understandably, so throughout the cold months here in Yorkshire, we do give them a nice heated house all year round, but especially making sure it's nice and warm in the winter for them. And it does mean that in the hot spells as well that we're able to keep our eyes on them and try and give them things that make them a bit more comfortable with that incoming hot weather as well.
The frozen food on offer here certainly has the seal of approval on what could be the hottest day of the year.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. If you're partial to sparkling wine, but you're hesitant to splurge out on champagne, consider looking much further south. Club Classique, previously known as Méthode Club Classique, is South Africa's answer to the famous French fizz. Rather as with champers, a bottle can be labelled Club Classique only if it's produced following very specific rules. Jessica Summer, founder of Mouse and Grape, joins me once again to tell us more.
Hello, Michael.
Lovely to see you again on GB News. What are these very specific rules?
So they basically have to be made in South Africa and also by the traditional method. So it's exactly the same method as champagne, but is it made in a different place. So they can't call it champagne because it's not made in Champagne, but it's very similar.
A double fermentation occurs in the bottle in the champagne method.
Correct.
And on the other hand, in Prosecco, it all happens in a sort of great vat.
Yes,
doesn't it?
Yes.
Which is why Prosecco tastes different from other sparkling wines.
Prosecco will taste much more fruity because you don't have the thing called lees aging. So in the bottle, when you have that second fermentation, the yeast is called lees aging, and they get stirred up and essentially insert the wine with brioche, biscuity, toasty flavours and aromas, which makes it much more complex.
Yes. So I confess to being rather anti-Prosecco.
Are you?
And you've now justified this view, because there is actually a difference between Prosecco and many of the others.
There is,
now,
yes.
Let's have a look at what you brought here. Here we've got a thing called Journey's End.
Yes.
And would you like to tell us, I've said that people didn't want to splash out on champers. They might want to go the Cap Classique route.
Yes.
What would they be saving? How much might that cost in a shop?
So this one here will cost you about £17.
17.
So it is at the lower end. And similarly, the next one along is about 20 and then around the £17 mark again for the Graham Beck. So it is considerably, I guess, better value for money than champagne and also has that amazing flavour too.
Well, we know it's cheaper than champagne. Now we have to judge whether it's better value.
We do.
But I'd also comment that it's probably a good deal cheaper than English sparkling wine, which is interesting.
Yes, that is correct.
What do you...
Yeah, you've got straight away. You can smell those kind of brioche top notes, but also a lovely apple, yellow apple, because it's a warmer climate. So you get more of the kind of stone fruit and yellow stewed fruit rather than the brighter fruit flavours of champagne.
I think that is very agreeable.
It is.
When you think about a long summer's evening, you think about drinking something over a long period of time, or at least I do. And I think I probably could drink that over a long period of time. 11.5.
Yes.
Which means it's quite mild.
Yes, it definitely is. And it goes very beautifully with the cheese.
Yes.
So I brought cheese for you, Michael, this time. So I'd love for you to eat this one here, which is from Nettlebed Creamery, and it's a British cheese. So these are all British cheeses here.
Look at that. It looks like a French brie or something like that.
It does, yes.
But it's actually a British cheese.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So the way that I always eat cheese and wine together is to have a bite of the cheese, then have a sip of the wine, and combine those flavours together. And what you'll find is you've got the lovely, the mouth-coating cheese, those bubbles and the acidity refresh your palate, and it just creates a gorgeous kind of strawberries and cream.
Now, this second one is called Kleiner Salsa.
It is, yes.
And you told me this is a little more expensive than the first one.
It is.
What price were we talking about here?
About 20.
About 20?
Yes.
Not vastly more.
No.
Are we going to taste £3 worth of improvement?
So what I really love about this one is the mousse that it creates in your mouth.
Yes.
So it fizzes up almost, but then also it's got a longer finish, this one as well, so I can still taste lovely, fresh apples there.
Oh, and by the way, it went so beautifully with the cheese, just as you advised. I'm going to drink this pink one next. Should I change my cheese for a pink one?
Yes. Have the goat's cheese, Michael. So,
this one here?
Yeah, so that is...
This is goat's cheese. Has it got a hint of blue about it?
So it's actually charcoal around that edge, and it's got a beautiful creamy texture, and honestly, with a Pinot Noir, traditional method, sparkling wine, it's absolutely mouth-watering.
That's a gorgeous cheese. Did you tell me it was English as well?
It is English, yes, and you can purchase that from Waitrose.
What's it called?
It's called Moody's.
Moody's.
Goat's cheese, yes.
I'm enjoying that very much.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which I like the most. I think they're all pretty good. Our South African sparkling wines, Classique, are they pretty well available in English wine shops, British wine shops?
They are, yes. You can find them in all of the supermarkets that you would be able to find them, specifically Journey's End and also Graham Beck as well.
We didn't hold up Graham Beck. Let me hold up Graham Beck.
Yes.
Oh, that's our pink one.
Yeah, so Graham Beck, and that's on offer at the moment, actually. That's $11.99 from Waitrose, which is exceptional value.
That is insane.
Yes, it is. And you can also, so I bought with me today, so this is a Pinot Noir only, so that's a rosé sparkling, but it's made from the same grape varieties as traditional champagne, so your Chardonnay and your Pinot Noir. And I think it just really captures that beautiful terroir of South Africa, the Western Cape.
What a lovely way, Jessica Summer, that has been of celebrating the arrival of September. And for those of you at home, I want to thank you for beginning your September with me and with GB News. And I want to thank all my guests, including Jessica, who have come into the studio today. And now, September is the time when people think going back to school or college. For all of those about to begin a new academic year, may you be uplifted by your studies. May you be inspired by your teachers. May your education open doors for you and for our nation. I'll be back to host this programme at the same time next week. Until then, bye-bye. Cheers.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Through the day today, we'll see a mixture of fairly warm sunshine, particularly towards the south-east of the UK, some thunderstorms also developing, and quite a humid feel to the weather, again, particularly towards the south and south-east. So looking at detail for today then, confirmation of some showers already breaking out this morning across some central and southern parts of England. As we go through the day, they'll become more extensive across parts of the Midlands, eventually building across parts of northern England too into the afternoon. So it's the north and northwest of the UK and across some western spots seeing the best of the lingering brightness into the afternoon, a few lighter showers